On February 23, 2023, in the small city of Quincy, Illinois, the body of 41-year-old Rebecca Becky Bliefnick was discovered in her home by a concerned family member. Becky, a devoted mother of 3 and a respected nurse, had been shot multiple times in a crime that shocked the local community. As investigators delved into the circumstances surrounding her tragic death, what began as a mysterious and brutal murder case turned into a deeply personal story of betrayal, suspicion, and heartbreak. Rebecca Becky Bliefnick was a woman who left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. Born and raised in the tight-knit community of Quincy, Illinois, Becky was the epitome of kindness, generosity, and strength. Her friends and family described her as a beacon of positivity and compassion, always ready to lend a helping hand or provide a listening ear. From a young age, Becky demonstrated a deep sense of empathy and a passion for caring for others. This led her to pursue a career in nursing, a calling that allowed her to channel her nurturing spirit into her profession. She was known to go above and beyond for her patients, treating them not just as individuals in need of care, but as people who deserved dignity and respect. Friend. Becky was such a natural caretaker. She was always thinking of others, always trying to make sure everyone was okay. She had this way of making you feel safe and cared for. Her patients loved her, and so did everyone who worked with her. Outside of her career, Becky's true pride and joy were her 3 sons. She devoted herself wholeheartedly to motherhood, pouring her energy into raising her boys with love, guidance, and a sense of adventure. Whether it was cheering them on at soccer games, helping with homework, or simply spending time with them at home, Becky was always present in their lives. Her kids were her world. She would do anything for them. No matter how busy she was, Becky always made time for her boys. She was the best mom. They adored her and she adored them. Becky was also a beloved member of her community. She was involved in local events and charities and often volunteered her time to help others. Those who knew her admired her unwavering commitment to her family and her unyielding dedication to making the world a better place. Becky's family life appeared idyllic on the surface, but like many families, it was not without its challenges. Becky had married her college sweetheart Tim Bliefnick, and for years they seemed to have a solid partnership. Tim, a medical device salesman, was known for his outgoing personality and success in his field. Together they built a life in Quincy, raising their 3 sons and becoming active members of the community. Despite her outward appearance of happiness, Becky had been facing difficulties in her personal life. She was in the midst of a contentious divorce from her husband Tim Bliefnick. What had once been a loving marriage had turned into a bitter legal battle, with custody of their children at the center of the dispute. By 2021, the BFNs had separated and their divorce proceedings became increasingly contentious. Friend. It was hard to watch things fall apart between them. Becky was really trying to keep things civil for the sake of the kids, but it wasn't easy. The divorce was tough on everyone. The breakdown of their marriage affected not just Becky and Tim, but their children and extended family as well. Custody battles, legal disputes, and unresolved issues created an atmosphere of tension and stress. Despite these challenges, Becky remained focused on her children and their well-being, determined to provide them with a stable and loving environment. As the legal battles intensified, the emotional toll on Becky became more apparent. Friends and family noticed that she was under immense pressure, juggling her responsibilities as a mother, a nurse, and a woman trying to navigate the complexities of a difficult divorce. Becky Bliefnick was not only a devoted mother and nurse, but also a woman deeply rooted in her community. Socially, she was well-liked and had a close-knit circle of friends who supported her through the ups and downs of life. Despite the challenges she faced in her personal life, Becky remained engaged with her community, continuing to volunteer and contribute to local causes. Financially, the Bliefnick family had enjoyed a comfortable middle-class lifestyle. Tim's job in medical sales provided a steady income, and Becky's career in nursing added to the family's financial stability. However, the costs of their ongoing legal battles and the eventual separation placed additional strain on their finances. On a personal level, Becky was known for her resilience and her ability to keep moving forward even in the face of adversity. Those closest to her admired her strength and her commitment to creating a better future for herself and her children despite the challenges she was facing. Friend, Becky was so strong. Even when things were tough, she kept going. She was determined to give her boys the best life possible no matter what. Becky's life was a blend of triumphs and challenges, but she remained unwavering in her dedication to her children and her community. Ever the growing pressures in her personal life would eventually culminate in a tragic end, one that no one could have anticipated. On the morning of February 23, 2023, the quiet streets of Quincy, Illinois were jolted by the discovery of a gruesome crime. Becky Bliefnick, a 41-year-old mother of three, had not been seen for a couple of days, raising concern among her family. Becky was known for being reliable and responsive, especially when it came to her children. When she failed to pick them up or return phone calls, her family knew something was wrong. One of Becky's family members, deeply worried after not hearing from her, decided to check on her at her home. When they arrived, what they found would forever change their lives. Becky Bliefnick was found lying on the floor of her home, having been shot multiple times. The discovery was shocking, and the family member immediately called 911. The tranquility of the Quincy neighborhood was shattered as police and emergency responders arrived on the scene. The Quincy Police Department quickly responded to the call. Officers arrived to find Becky Bliefnick dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Her home now a crime scene. As investigators began their work, the quiet suburban home became the epicenter of a rapidly unfolding murder investigation. Detective interview. When we arrived, it was clear that this was not a random break-in or burglary. The level of violence suggested something far more personal. Our initial focus was on gathering as much evidence as possible from the scene. We knew that time was critical in securing leads and identifying suspects. The crime scene was meticulously combed for evidence. Investigators collected fingerprints, bullet casings, and other forensic evidence. The house itself showed no signs of forced entry, leading detectives to believe that Becky may have known her killer. One of the most perplexing aspects of the case was the lack of an apparent motive. Becky had no known enemies, and her life was devoted to her children, work, and family. However, as the investigation unfolded, detectives began to focus on her troubled personal life, particularly her ongoing divorce from Tim Bliefnick. The police knew that statistically, when a woman is murdered, the perpetrator is often someone close to her. With that in mind, they began to look into Becky's relationships, starting with her estranged husband Tim Bliefnick. The couple's contentious divorce proceedings became a key area of focus for investigators. Becky Bliefnick's body was taken to the Adams County Coroner's Office for an autopsy. The results of the autopsy were critical in piecing together the events leading up to her death and determining the exact cause. Medical examiner interview. The victim sustained multiple gunshot wounds, including several to the torso and head. The number and placement of the wounds suggested a deliberate and targeted attack. This was not a random shooting. This was personal. The autopsy confirmed that Becky had been shot at close range, with at least 3 of the shots being fatal. The evidence indicated that the attack was swift and brutal, leaving Becky with little chance to defend herself. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide, and the autopsy report provided investigators with valuable information about the nature of the crime. The autopsy also revealed that Becky had likely been killed on the evening of February 21, 2 days before her body was discovered. This timeline helped narrow down the window in which the crime had occurred and allowed investigators to focus their attention on the hours leading up to her death. With the crime scene processed, the autopsy complete, and the timeline established, the investigation into Becky Bliefnick's murder was now in full swing. Detectives had their work cut out for them as they followed up on leads, conducted interviews, and dug deeper into Becky's life in search of answers. The key question remained: who would want Becky Bliefnick dead, and why? As the Quincy Police Department began to unravel the mystery of Becky Bliefnick's murder, the investigation took on a new urgency. With no sign of forced entry and the brutality of the crime indicating a personal motive, detectives turned their attention to Becky's inner circle, those closest to her, particularly in her tumultuous personal life. Detective interview. We knew early on that this wasn't a random act. The nature of the crime suggested that it was deliberate, and we had to focus on those with potential motives. Our priority was to gather every piece of evidence that could help us identify the killer. Forensic teams scoured Becky's home for anything that could point them in the right direction. Fingerprints, DNA samples, and ballistics evidence were all collected. Investigators also took note of the unusual details, such as the lack of forced entry, indicating that Becky may have let her killer in, or that the killer had a way to access the home without breaking in. Cell phone records, surveillance footage from nearby homes, and Becky's own digital footprint were also crucial to the investigation. Detectives worked around the clock to piece together Becky's final days, hoping to uncover any communications movements or connections that could lead them to the perpetrator. As evidence was gathered, investigators began the painstaking process of interviewing everyone who had been a part of Becky's life. Family members, friends, neighbors, and colleagues were all questioned in an effort to better understand Becky's relationships and identify potential suspects. Friend interview. Becky was loved by so many people it was hard to imagine anyone wanting to hurt her. But as we started talking to the police, it became clear that they were focused on her personal life, especially the struggles she had been going through with her divorce. Many of Becky's friends and family members confirmed that her life had been difficult in recent months. Her divorce from Tim Bliefnick had become increasingly hostile, with disputes over child custody and finances putting a strain on both parties. Those closest to Becky revealed that she had been under immense stress trying to shield her children from the ugliness of the situation while navigating her own emotional turmoil. Becky's colleagues at the hospital also shared insight into her life during this time. While she remained dedicated to her work and her patients, they noticed that she had become more withdrawn, often showing signs of exhaustion and anxiety. Colleague interview. She was trying so hard to hold everything together, but you could see that she was worn down by everything that was happening in her personal life. She didn't talk much about it, but you could tell it was taking a toll on her. As investigators interviewed more people in Becky's life, certain details began to emerge that would shape the course of the investigation. One key piece of evidence came from a neighbor who recalled seeing a vehicle parked near Becky's home on the night of the murder. The description of the vehicle matched one associated with someone very close to Becky, her estranged husband Tim Bliefnick. Tim Bliefnick had already been on the police's radar due to the contentious divorce, but now with a potential witness linking him to the scene on the night of the murder, he became a person of interest. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Tim's home and vehicle, hoping to find further evidence that could either confirm or rule out his involvement. Detective interview. The search of Tim Bliefnick's home and vehicle yielded several pieces of evidence that warranted further investigation. We discovered items that could potentially link him to the crime scene, as well as digital evidence that raised additional questions. The turning point in the investigation came when ballistic tests on the bullets found at the crime scene matched a firearm registered to Tim Bliefnick. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation squarely onto Becky's estranged husband. With the ballistic match in hand, detectives intensified their focus on Tim Bliefnick as the prime suspect in Becky's murder. However, the case was far from straightforward. Tim had maintained his innocence throughout the investigation, insisting that he had nothing to do with Becky's death. Investigators began to explore possible motives. The ongoing divorce and custody battle provided a clear motive. Tim had been facing the possibility of losing custody of his children and substantial financial obligations in the divorce. Friends and family revealed that the separation had taken a bitter turn, with both parties exchanging heated messages and accusations. Friend interview. Things had gotten really ugly between them. There were a lot of arguments, especially about the kids. Becky was trying to do what was best for them, but Tim wasn't handling it well. As detectives pieced together the evidence, a picture began to emerge of a man who may have been pushed to the edge by the fear of losing his family and the financial burden that a divorce could bring. While Tim's attorneys argued that the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecution was building a strong case pointing to the mounting tension in the relationship as a motive for murder. With the evidence pointing to Tim Bliefnick, the case was about to enter its next phase, a battle in court that would determine whether justice would be served for Becky Bliefnick. After weeks of intense investigation, the Quincy Police Department was closing in on a prime suspect, Becky Bliefnick's estranged husband Tim Bliefnick. The combination of ballistic evidence, witness testimony, and the increasingly volatile relationship between Becky and Tim pointed in one direction. However, the police knew they needed a solid case before making an arrest. Detective interview. We were building a case that would hold up in court. It wasn't enough to have circumstantial evidence. We needed a clear, undeniable connection between Tim Bliefnick and the murder of Becky. That's when we had a significant breakthrough. The breakthrough came in the form of digital evidence. Investigators uncovered a series of online searches conducted by Tim in the weeks leading up to Becky's death. These searches included queries about how to break into a house, how to commit a murder without getting caught, and information on firearms similar to the one used in the crime. These online searches, combined with the ballistic match to Tim's firearm, provided investigators with the concrete link they needed. The case against him was growing stronger by the day, and police felt confident that they had enough to make an arrest. Before making a move, the Quincy Police Department, along with state authorities, carefully planned their operation. Knowing that Tim Bliefnick had no prior criminal record and had been cooperative during earlier interviews, the police were cautious but determined. Detective interview: we didn't want to take any chances. Even though Tim had appeared cooperative, we had to be prepared for the possibility that he might resist arrest or try to flee. We placed him under surveillance to ensure that we knew his whereabouts at all times. For several days, plainclothes officers kept a close watch on Tim Bliefnick's home and monitored his movements. They wanted to ensure that he didn't attempt to leave town or take any drastic measures. At the same time, detectives worked with the district attorney's office to secure an arrest warrant. On the morning of March 14, 2023, the Quincy Police Department was ready to make their move. The operation had been planned down to the smallest detail to ensure the safety of everyone involved. The team included local police officers, detectives, and a SWAT unit standing by in case the situation escalated. The arrest operation was executed in the early hours of the morning, with officers surrounding Tim Bliefnick's home to prevent any potential escape. The lead detective knocked on the front door, announcing their presence and their intent to serve an arrest warrant. Tim Bliefnick answered the door and was immediately placed under arrest. He complied with the officer's instructions and was handcuffed without incident. Inside the house, police conducted a search, seizing additional electronic devices and documents that could provide further evidence in the case. Detective interview: the arrest went smoothly. Tim didn't resist and everything was done by the book. But you could tell that he was shocked. It seemed like he didn't expect it to come to this. Tim Bliefnick was transported to the Adams County Jail, where he was booked on charges of first-degree murder. The news of his arrest sent shock waves through the community of Quincy, where many had been following the case closely. To those who knew the Bliefnick family, the idea that Tim could be involved in Becky's death was both shocking and heartbreaking. Friend interview: it was hard to believe. We knew that things had been bad between them, but no one thought it would come to this. Becky's family was devastated. They wanted justice, but this was just the beginning. With Tim Bliefnick in custody, the legal process was now underway. The case against him would soon be tested in court, where the prosecution would present the evidence linking him to Becky's murder and Tim's defense team would argue for his innocence. The trial would be a grueling and emotional ordeal for everyone involved as the search for justice for Becky Bliefnick continued. As Tim Bliefnick's trial approached, the legal teams were deep into preparations, navigating a series of pretrial motions and hearings that would shape the course of the proceedings. Both the prosecution and the defense were working tirelessly to build their cases, addressing various legal and procedural issues before the trial began. Pretrial motions included arguments over the admissibility of evidence, with the defense challenging certain pieces of evidence gathered during the investigation. Tim Bliefnick's attorneys filed motions to exclude some of the digital evidence, arguing that it was obtained unlawfully or was not directly relevant to the case. Defense attorney interview: we sought to exclude evidence that we believed was improperly obtained or that could unfairly prejudice the jury. Our goal was to ensure that Tim received a fair trial based on facts rather than emotional reactions. On the other side, the prosecution worked to ensure that all relevant evidence was allowed. They argued that the digital searches, ballistic evidence, and witness testimonies were crucial to establishing Tim's guilt. The judge made several rulings on these motions, deciding which evidence would be admissible in court. In addition to evidentiary motions, the defense sought to have the trial moved to a different venue, citing concerns about media coverage and potential bias from the local community. However, the request was denied, and the trial remained scheduled to take place in Adams County. As the trial began, both the prosecution and the defense laid out their strategies. The prosecution aimed to present a compelling case that demonstrated Tim Bliefnick's motive and opportunity to commit the crime, while the defense sought to cast doubt on the evidence and suggest alternative theories. Prosecutor interview: our strategy was to show that Tim had both motive and opportunity. We had strong evidence, including the ballistic match, the incriminating digital searches, and witness testimony that placed him near the scene. Our goal was to connect all these dots for the jury. The prosecution planned to use a combination of physical evidence, expert testimony, and witness accounts to build their case. They focused on proving that Tim had been involved in a premeditated crime driven by the acrimonious divorce and the fear of losing custody of his children. The defense, however, aimed to challenge the prosecution's evidence and argue that Tim was not guilty. They contended that the evidence was circumstantial and that the digital searches could be interpreted in other ways. The defense also planned to highlight any inconsistencies or gaps in the prosecution's case. Defense attorney interview. Our strategy was to cast reasonable doubt on the evidence presented. We wanted to show that there were alternative explanations for the digital searches and that the prosecution had not definitively proven Tim's guilt. The trial saw a series of impactful testimonies from both sides. Key witnesses included friends and family members of Becky Bliefnick, forensic experts, and law enforcement officers involved in the investigation. For the prosecution, one of the most crucial witnesses was the forensic ballistics expert who confirmed that the bullets used in the murder matched a firearm registered to Tim Bliefnick. Their testimony helped to solidify the link between Tim and the crime scene. Ballistics expert interview. We conducted extensive testing to match the bullets found at the scene with the firearm in Tim Bliefnick's possession. The results were conclusive, and this evidence was critical in establishing a direct connection. Another key witness was Becky's close friend who testified about the emotional state Becky had been in leading up to her death. The friend's testimony helped paint a picture of the stress and turmoil Becky was experiencing due to the ongoing divorce. Friend testimony. Becky was under so much pressure. She was really struggling with the divorce, and I knew she was worried about what might happen. She tried to stay strong for her kids, but it was taking a toll. The defense called witnesses to challenge the prosecution's narrative. They included experts who testified about the limitations of digital evidence and potential issues with the investigation's handling of the case. Additionally, Tim Bliefnick took the stand in his own defense, maintaining his innocence and denying any involvement in Becky's murder. Tim Bliefnick testimony. I loved Becky and I would never hurt her. Yes, we had our problems, but I was not involved in her death. The evidence against me is circumstantial and doesn't prove that I'm guilty. The trial was emotionally charged with testimony from those who knew Becky intimately and from experts who provided critical insights into the evidence. As the prosecution and defense made their final arguments, the jury was tasked with deliberating on the complex and heart-wrenching case. With the case presented, the jury's decision would ultimately determine Tim Bliefnick's fate and bring closure to a case that had gripped the Quincy community and beyond. The jury deliberated for several days, meticulously reviewing the evidence, including the ballistic reports, digital searches, and witness testimonies. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that reasonable doubt remained, while the prosecution emphasized the strength of their case and the motive behind the crime. On April 15, 2023, the jury returned to the courtroom to deliver their verdict. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone present awaiting the decision. The judge called the court to order as the jury foreperson announced the verdict. Tim Bliefnick was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury's decision was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that justice had been served, but sorrow for the tragic loss of Becky Bliefnick and the impact on her family. Following the verdict, the trial entered the sentencing phase. The court was tasked with determining an appropriate sentence for Tim Bliefnick, considering the gravity of his crime and the impact on the victims' families. During the sentencing phase, both sides presented arguments. The prosecution urged the court to impose the maximum penalty, arguing that the brutality of the crime and the premeditated nature of the murder warranted a severe sentence. The defense, on the other hand, sought leniency, arguing for a lesser sentence and highlighting any mitigating factors. They portrayed Tim as a man who had been struggling with personal issues and claimed that his actions, while wrong, were not devoid of complexity. Defense attorney interview. While Tim's actions were undoubtedly tragic, we argued that he should be considered in the context of his personal struggles and the tumultuous nature of his relationship with Becky. We hoped for a sentence that took into account these factors and offered some measure of compassion. Victim impact statements were also presented, providing a poignant reminder of the personal toll the crime had taken on Becky's family. Her family members spoke of the profound loss they had experienced and the ongoing impact on their lives. On May 2, 2023, the court sentenced Tim Bliefnick to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentence was a reflection of the severity of the crime and the impact on Becky's family. The judge's decision aimed to ensure that Tim would not have the opportunity to reoffend or seek release. The verdict and sentencing brought mixed emotions to those affected by Becky Bleck's murder. For her family and friends, there was a sense of justice but also deep sorrow for the loss of a beloved mother friend and colleague. Family member interview. While we are relieved that Tim was held accountable for his actions, nothing can bring Becky back. We're trying to focus on honoring her memory and supporting each other as we move forward. The Quincy community, which had closely followed the case, also reacted with a mix of relief and grief. The case had drawn significant media attention, and the trial had been a source of intense public interest. The community was left to reflect on the tragedy and support the BNCK family in their time of loss. The trial of Tim BNCK concluded with a verdict and sentence that aimed to provide justice for Becky BNCK and her family. While the legal process had reached its end, the emotional and personal impact of the case continued to resonate with those affected. The story of Becky's life, her tragic death, and the pursuit of justice remained a poignant reminder of the complexities and challenges of the human experience.